I'm Dustin Mielke with Oklahoma Farm Bureau, and I'm joined by Rodd Moesel, Oklahoma Farm Bureau's president, and we're talking about the start of the 2019 Oklahoma legislative session. Now, Rodd, as we've been talking the last few months and preparing for legislative session, one of the main storylines about this session in Oklahoma has been the number of new legislators that we have coming on board for their first legislative session.
It's a shocking number. In all the years that I've watched the legislature, there's certainly never been a crop of so many rookies, and that's enhanced even more by the fact we have so many that you could call sophomores that are just in their second two-year term. So, but I think we decided earlier there's like 56 out of the 149 that are in there just getting ready to start their first term this next week. So,
how does that change things for Oklahoma Farm Bureau as we gear up for this legislative session?
Well, it puts the pressure on us, I think, there's so many that we don't know a lot about yet. So we don't have relationships with a lot of those members. So it puts a lot of pressure on our amazing public policy staff, where we've got Ron Justice and Zach, and have just added Robin Matthews to that team as well. And with the ever-present and great technician Marla Peak, well, all of them have to work to get relationships in our behalf with those members. So there's a lot of new members that we've got to just get to meet, find out whether they have any kind of agricultural tie, or whether they came from a small town or rural town and have some agricultural family members so that they already have some understanding of these issues, or whether we have to totally educate them from the beginning. So it's lots of new faces to learn more about, and then to start teaching them about Oklahoma agriculture in rural Oklahoma.
And looking outside of the legislative branch and still in state government, we have a new governor in Kevin Stitt, new lieutenant governor in Matt Pinnell, new secretary of agriculture in Blaine Arthur. The list keeps going on and on. So how does that change the way that Farm Bureau is looking just at Oklahoma government for this upcoming year?
It's kind of the same deal with the legislature. You got so many new faces that it puts us in the role of being educators, not just to legislators, but educators to new executive branch members. We're very excited and hopeful about Governor Stitt, and very excited and hopeful about Matt Pinnell. And of course, Blaine Arthur, we already know a lot about from her long and deep roots in agriculture and her previous service as associate commissioner. So I would say she's not as much of an unknown as several of the others that we're going to be dealing with in the executive branch. But we also will have a lot of interactions with the Department of Environmental Quality and the Water Resources Board and the Department of Commerce. And so we're dealing and working to educate and develop relationships with folks in all these agencies across all of government, as well as with the new legislators.
Now, looking at the actual, policy issues we'll be working on this legislative session, I know we're to the point we know some bills, we have bill numbers, we know topics. What are some of those issues in agricultural and rural policy that Farm Bureau's got their eye on for this coming legislative session?
There's a bunch of them. I guess first would be the issues that we're likely to be playing defense on. Agriculture over the years, and Farm Bureau's played a leading role in this, has established a number of areas that are very important to us and help protect agricultural production and the small businesses across rural Oklahoma. And so we'll be working hard to protect capital gains tax exemption that became a big issue last year. We'll be working hard to protect our sales tax exemption, which is very important. It's just like what manufacturers, when you are buying inputs to make your product, sales tax is only designed to be applied at the point of final sale. And so it's very important that our producers, who are competing with producers in all other states, have that same exemption on their inputs, so that they aren't paying sales tax on their fertilizer and their animal feed and their other inputs that go into producing their crop. And that should ultimately be charged when it's sold as a loaf of bread or sold as a steak. So we'll be working hard to protect that sales tax exemption. There's also a number of bills that are trying to expand the use of ad valorem taxes to municipal government and to safety and security type issues. And ad valorem has a disproportionate impact on agricultural producers, and so we'll be working hard to try to limit and stop those expansions of ad valorem tax and the extreme negative impact. The thing people don't realize a lot of times in ad valorem is it doesn't matter whether you're making a profit or not making a profit. Those expenses go on year after year, whether you're losing money or whether you're making money. And so that's especially punishing on agriculture, which has to have a lot of land and a lot of equipment that can be taxed for ad valorem, whether it's profitable or not. It's not like an income tax you only pay when you're making money, or like sales tax you're only paying when you're buying something that's in its final use.
And a couple other issues I know that we've been looking at for this session is, rural health care, rural education, and while those might not be traditional, what we think of as farm and ranch issues, they really impact our rural residents, our Farm Bureau members across the state.
In our members, I would say in the last several conventions, rural health care and the number of issues that we're voting on rural health care keeps moving up more and more, and that's probably been magnified by some recent hospital closings. There had been a senator that had totally blocked all legislation for a number of years now that related to the expansion of making it easier for nurse practitioners to serve in rural Oklahoma without being under the direct control or supervision of a doctor. And we obviously would much prefer to have doctors in every small town in Oklahoma. We would love to have doctors readily available, but there simply are not doctors going to every little town in Oklahoma. And the choice between having a nurse practitioner or not having anything is an easy choice for our members. And so we've been very supportive of expanding the ability of nurse practitioners to practice, and think that is one very important tool for a lot of rural Oklahoma, because we just were talking earlier today about Frederick, Oklahoma, and if a hospital closes in Frederick, now somebody in that area, they've got to go either all the way to Altus or all the way to Lawton before they have a chance at a hospital. And if you have a heart condition or have some health problem, so if nurse practitioner is not the same as a doctor, but if a nurse practitioner is still in Frederick, that's a big difference than not having anything. So we're very supportive of expanding those kinds of options for rural health care, and lots of other solutions we're going to be looking at. Another one where we're going to be playing offense, it's very important, is the temporary pipeline issue. And it's been involved in some court cases lately between county commissioners and oil and gas companies. And the Supreme Court just ruled that giving increased power to the Corporation Commission in that area. But we think they've been overlooking the role of landowners. And so we're going to be trying to take legislative action to make sure that even though it's the Corporation Commission that's involved in the permitting, that the oil and gas companies first have to deal with the landowner. We think that land, that bar ditch, that is private landowners' property first and foremost, and they need to deal with them before they deal with the Corporation Commission.
As we talk about rural education, that's something, of course, with the focus on education last legislative session, talking more about education. What are the things that Farm Bureau members really think about and are concerned with when it comes to specifically education in our rural parts of our state?
Well, education, of course, is critical, and I think all of us care deeply about the education of the youth in not just in our own families, and whether that be children or grandchildren, but care deeply about all the kids in that community, because they're going to be the employees that on the farms and ranches. They're going to be the folks working the Main Street businesses, and so we care deeply about that education. Our members have been very outspoken in wanting to protect their local school districts. And one of the concerns is whether students in those districts get as good a choices on subjects like calculus and advanced subjects. But we think with technology that's available now, there's no excuse for not being able to deliver those advanced subjects that you maybe can't support a chemistry teacher or can't support a advanced math teacher in the local school. That those subjects can be readily available through technology and remote classroom type things, and so we're very supportive of using that technology to enhance things. And one of the things small schools do well is kids in those small schools get a very well-rounded experience. A lot of times they're involved in athletics, they're involved in FFA, they're involved in 4-H, they're involved in other student groups. If you're in a big school, a lot of times they only get to be involved in one of those things and don't get to be involved in a lot of those. And so kids from small schools, one reason they perform so well once they get to college is that they've had this broad background. And actually the dropout rates is something that's great concern in our state, and our urban districts have dropout rates depending on whether you measure it from 9th grade or 10th grade. Their dropout rates are from 30 to 50%. Where the rural areas are usually 25% or less, and which is still a terrible number, but we are doing a better job because of that well-roundedness that happens in smaller schools. We are getting more kids all the way through 12th grade and across rural Oklahoma than we do in our urban areas.
Now, as we get ready for the 19 legislative session, we're not dealing with something that's hung over previous sessions, which was a state budget crisis. And even though we're hearing better numbers budget-wise, I take it it's not necessarily a time to let the foot off the gas concerning fiscal issues as we head into a little bit sunshinier, maybe, budget reality.
We're very excited, I would say. We just had a big discussion at Farm Bureau Board last week, and and I'm sure the legislators and all across the state, there's a great relief that we're not into more budget cuts at this point. But I think we do know that Oklahoma's economy is cyclical and goes in cycles, and part of that is driven by agriculture, but what commodity prices are. Part of it's driven by oil and gas. But we hope, and we've been proud of this. The State House is talking about saving part of that money, not feeling the pressure to spend all the money from this year. We've cut so hard in some areas, like the Extension Service is something that we care deeply about. Extension Service has been punished terribly the last few years with huge cuts when we were in tough times, and we're hoping that agencies like the Extension Service and lots of other good causes. We'd taken a lot of money from rural county roads and highway funds, and we hope that will have some of that money restored during this better cycle. But we do also hope that they'll follow the House's leadership and save part of that money to set aside for future years when maybe the picture isn't as rosy as it looks like it might be right now.
And as we get ready to really get into the heart of session here pretty quickly, why is it important for Farm Bureau members to be active and engaged at the state capitol?
I would tell you, we're very excited about the great public policy team we've got, and they can do good work, and they can do a lot to help educate the members and to tell our case. But nothing works as good as members talking to legislators or to administration leaders too. I mean, if a member calls and talks to somebody about sales tax exemptions or calls about pipelines and the bar ditches, that has a much greater effect if it's one of their constituents than what it does if Zach or Ron or Marla talks to them. Not that they aren't all great, but that really makes a difference when they know that real people, that real farmers, real ranchers are contacting them and talking to them. So I just can't say enough how important it is for whether you do it with a phone call to your legislative member, whether you do it by meeting them at a community breakfast or a community social. Stop and visit with them and share your opinion on these important issues. It does make a difference. I mean, they kind of weight the impact of the public policy folks they see from Farm Bureau and teacher groups and all kinds of other things, and weight that with constituents, and there's nothing like hearing from a local farmer or rancher. So Farm Bureau members, study the issues and take time to talk to your members and share with your members what your opinions are on these important issues that face our state.
All right. Well, thank you, Rod. And thank you for joining us for our 2019 Oklahoma Legislative Session Preview.